At some point in the TOK course, every student comes across the question, what is art? Or at least they should come across that question. See, I believe it's one of the most important questions that we can ask both within and beyond the TOK course. And in today's video, I'll give an overview of how art could be understood and defined through the concept of style. And I'm going to link that debate to the implications for TOK. Welcome to TOK Today. My name's Daniel and I enjoy writing and vlogging about theory of knowledge. That's TOK. Now today we're asking the question, what is art? And rather than simply saying, well, it's subjective, it's up to the artist or it's up to the viewer-knower to decide what is art, we're looking at whether art can be defined using the concept of style. Now let's take as our objective example today Italian artist Maurizio Cattelan's 1929 piece titled Comedian. Most of you will know that the piece consisted of a banana taped to the wall of a gallery using electrician's duct tape. This piece was recently sold for $6,240,000 US. Now our starting point is to consider whether art exists in the object or in the viewer-knower. Now this is a very long and convoluted debate going back many centuries. If art is defined by the viewer-knower, then we are saying that it is the pre-existing knowledge that the viewer-knower brings to the object that defines it as art. Such pre-existing knowledge could include knowing who made the object, the context within which the object is made, and the other pieces made by the same artist, the socio-cultural meaning of the object, the cultural and financial status of the object within society. But on the other hand, if we argue that art is defined by the characteristics of the object itself, then we're saying that what makes an object art are features specific to that object, that place that object into the category of art. Now, applying this dichotomy to Cattelan's piece Comedian, if we're arguing that the viewer-knower defines art, then we're saying that it was the people who viewed Comedian who defined it as art. And as such, the argument why someone might want to pay over $6 million for a banana and a piece of duct tape becomes apparent. Conversely, if we're arguing that Comedian's status as art is inherent to the piece, then we're saying it's the combination of specific features of the piece that have defined it as art. Now, I can hear you saying, but it's just a banana and a piece of electrician's paint. And you'd be right, of course. But applying the same logic to Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa, we would have to say, but it's just some coloured oil and a piece of canvas. And Michelangelo's David is just an old piece of stone. And the Last Judgment on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel is just coloured plaster. The idea that art is defined by the formal elements of the object itself has a long and significant history in the discipline of art history. Some of the art historians who've argued this position include Clive Bell in his 1914 book Art, and he introduced the concept of significant form, arguing that art is defined by the arrangement of lines, colours and shapes that evoke an aesthetic emotion. He argues that the intrinsic formal qualities of an artwork are what make it art, regardless of context or the viewer's interpretation. Now, secondly, we could look to Clement Greenberg, who argued that the value of art lies in its formal aesthetic qualities rather than its meaning or contextual significance. In his 1960 essay, Modernist Painting, he emphasised the autonomy of painting beyond the autonomy of the viewer-knower. Now, I make this point because in order to consider whether art is defined by style, we're going to focus on the idea that art is defined by the object rather than the viewer-knower. Of course, the viewer-knower has a significant role in constructing and identifying those style categories, but we have to start somewhere, and we're going to start with the object. So what is style? Taylor Swift wrote a song called Style, the Black Eyed Peas sang about My Style, and Harry Styles has, well, obviously. But how do we define style? We could define it as the constant form and sometimes the constant elements, qualities and expression in the art of an individual or a group. The term is also applied to the whole activity of an individual or society, as in speaking of a lifestyle or the style of a civilization. And that was art historian Shapiro's definition. And in doing so, Shapiro is arguing that the physical aesthetic features of the object can be linked as characteristic of an individual knower or group, i.e. knowledge community. He also links it to cultural meaning, and this gives us a compromise in the object versus knower debate that we outlined earlier. However, Shapiro was criticised for this definition by Erwin Panofsky for not recognising the importance of the meaning of the content of an object in defining its style. Every object has meanings attached to it by the viewer-knower, and those meanings can, in part, define the style of the object, and vice versa. The meaning of the object can define its style. So let's consider the example of Bernini's 17th century sculpture, The Ecstasy of St. Teresa, which depicts Carmelite nun Teresa d'Avila being visited by an angel. Now, this sculpture is said to be Baroque in style because of both the formal elements of the sculpture and the meanings conveyed within the sculpture. John Law's paper, Assembling the Baroque, provides several pertinent insights that support the argument that the Ecstasy of St. Teresa is classified in the Baroque style due to both its physical form and the meanings depicted in the sculpture. Now, some key points from Law that could be relevant to this discussion include that the physical form of the sculpture is theatrical, and by depicting it in such a way, Bernini has produced an object that is not just to be observed, but is an experience that envelopes the viewer, merging physical form with emotional and spiritual meaning. Such merging of the boundaries of observation and experience are typical characteristics of the Baroque. Now, this further undoing of boundaries, merging the physical and the spiritual, is seen as the intentional blurring of the distinction between the observer or the knower and divine ecstasy. And we can also observe how meanings depicted in the sculpture, Teresa's spiritual rapture, are integral to its Baroque classification, as the physical form is designed to extend beyond its materiality to evoke spiritual transcendence. We can see issues of objectivity and subjectivity in TOK here. Now, we could continue to identify the Baroque features of this statue, the ways in which both the physical form and the conveyed meanings are designed to elicit an emotional response. But we need to link this to TOK, which I'm going to get to in a second. I just want to say, if you're enjoying today's video, then I'd be ever so grateful if you press the like button. And if you want to keep up to date with content from my channel, then please consider subscribing. Thank you. Now, to help us to further understand the role of style in defining art, let's look at a more contemporary example. This is Edward Hopper's 1942 painting, Nighthawks. We look through a window of a diner late at night in urban America. We see four people, a man serving behind the bar, a man and a woman who are possibly a couple, and a man with his back turned to us. These four people are relatively small in comparison to the rest of the picture. The left 40% of the painting is an empty street and dark houses. It's a very evocative painting. It's often held up as an exemplar of the modernist style of painting. It fits with many of the features that are said to characterize modernism. It portrays ordinary people doing ordinary things rather than kings and queens, aristocrats, or even angels. It has a simplified geometric composition. It focuses on sharp lines, simplified shapes, rather than details and curves. As such, the painting has a flatness that is characteristic of modernism. And as such, we can start to understand that both the Ecstasy of St. Teresa and Nighthawks are both artistic knowledge, because they fit into identifiable artistic styles. St. Teresa into the Baroque and Nighthawks into modernism. So what we're saying is that style is defined by identifiable external physical characteristics that are near empirical. However, the contextual meanings attributed to these features and their categorization as styles are produced by viewer-knowers and their constituent knowledge communities. So it seems like we have a pretty solid base on which to say that art is not just a subjective construction of the viewer-knower, but is defined by formal aesthetic elements grouped together in what we call styles, and as such it has objective elements to it. But no, it wouldn't be as straightforward as all of that. Of course, there are problems with using the concept of style to define art. Let's start with an example. Earlier, we looked at a bar in Hopper's Nighthawks. Let's look at another bar, but this one's in 19th century France. The painting that you are looking at is A Bar at the Folies Bergère, painted by Edward Manet in 1882. It's a stunning piece, considered provocative and risque in its day. However, today we may admire it for its clever technical mastery, incredible detail, evocation of ambiguous questions in its main subject. And the question that's pertinent for TOK that seeks to define art through style is, which style category does A Bar at the Folies Bergère fit into? Generally, commentators and texts will say that Manet is an impressionist, a style category emerging in France in the early 19th century and possibly lasting until the earlier 20th century. And this is a rather broad style category, but typically it's characterized by an emphasis on catching light in non-distinct object forms. The forms painted are the shapes of the light rather than specific objects, i.e. the impression of the light, as we see here in Monet's 1872 painting, Impression Sunrise. However, Manet's bar has a focus on painting details, and arguably the emphasis is not so much on light, but the meaning of the objects within the painting. Indeed, art critic Roger Fry was so concerned about placing Manet in the Impressionist style category that he titled his 1910 London exhibition of Manet's work, Manet and the Post-Impressionists, thus removing Manet from the Impressionist category. So what's all of this got to do with TOK? Well, if we go back to our original question, can art be understood through the concept of style? We see a problem with the concept of style. Style is, by necessity, a set of ideal type characteristics, and a lot of art will not contain the required combination of ideal type characteristics to easily fit into any one category. If we go back to Hopper, his paintings are often said to represent the loneliness and alienation of modern urban life. However, Clement Greenberg argued that modernist art should be autonomous. That's art that's dedicated to new expression through testing its own norms rather than espousing a cliched message. As such, maybe Hopper's work doesn't easily fit into modernist art. The issue for TOK here is that style may be a set of constructed categories that are placed on top of the knowledge world to make sense of that world, and it usefully provides us with an understanding of how artistic knowledge relates to each other. It helps us to understand what knowledge can be included in the category and what should be excluded, and therefore it can help us to say what is artistic knowledge and what is not artistic knowledge. In TOK terms, style is a classification system developed by a community of knowers that provides us with an interpretative narrative that helps us to define and make sense of artistic knowledge. However, we could devise a different set of style categories that would then change our understanding of artistic knowledge and would in turn change what is included and excluded from the big heading art. For example, if we got rid of all other style categories and just had two style categories, that is monochrome and polychrome. Now, we now place Michelangelo's sculpture David, Duchamp's fountain, and Malevich's Black Square into the same category. That's the category of monochrome. We would see these three pieces as being just as closely interrelated as we currently see Van Gogh's Sun Monet's water lilies, and Degas' ballet. Now, I'm not saying that our new category is wrong. I'm saying that if our understanding of artistic knowledge is determined and constructed by labels, then there's a lack of certainty in what constitutes artistic knowledge. And that sort of brings us back full circle to saying, well, it all depends on the subjective interpretation of the viewer. And that's not satisfactory for a theory of knowledge. A theory of knowledge needs to be able to say more than it depends. So whilst I think that style is a convenient way to identify and understand artistic knowledge, it is ultimately of limited value to constructing a theory of artistic knowledge. Now, of course, there are other ways that we could define art, in particular the methodology and the tools used in the construction of artistic knowledge, or the purpose for the construction of artistic knowledge. But this video is now easily long enough, and we'll have to save those other interesting definitions for another artistic video. Now, if there's anything else that you'd like to see me cover on the channel, then please let me know in the video comments box. Well done for making it this far. Thank you so much for watching. Stay talktastic, my friends.